My name is Zach Arnold. I'm a Hollywood film and television editor, a documentary director, father of two, and creator of Optimize Yourself. Since beginning my career, I have battled attention issues, anxiety, and creative burnout more times than I can keep track of. Back in 2005, after almost losing the battle with suicidal depression, I decided that I no longer wanted to sacrifice myself for the sake of my career. I was done barely surviving. I wanted to thrive. Since then, I have obsessively searched for every possible way to optimize my own creative performance. My journey is far from complete, but I have now made it my mission to shorten your learning curve so you can forge your own path to greatness without having to sacrifice balance in the process. Now it's time to start designing the optimized version of you. Hello and welcome to episode number 15 of the Optimize Yourself podcast. If you're a first-time listener, I'm grateful to have you with me, and I appreciate you taking the time to focus on finding just a little bit of work-life balance and sanity in this ridiculously crazy world that we live in. If you enjoy this podcast and you are inspired to learn more and listen more, I invite you to subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or whatever app you prefer, because I have tons of great guests, giveaways, and free training coming your way on a weekly basis. Just visit optimizeyourself.me/subscribe for more info, or you can just subscribe directly in your app of choice. If you have been keeping up with the latest episodes in October, you know that this is Advance Yourself Month, and we are diving into the weeds, talking about taking practical, boots-on-the-ground action steps to move your creative career forwards. Or, more specifically, for this week, how to transition from climbing one ladder to climbing a different one, even if that means taking one step back to take several forwards in the future. My guest today is Monica Daniel, who has become somewhat of a legend of my former podcast. This interview was actually recorded a couple of years ago, and it has become the #1 most downloaded episode of Fitness in Post, because it answered the most common question that was asked out of complete and utter desperation in all of Hollywood. How do I get out of reality television so I can work in scripted television instead? Monica and I walked through the practical steps that she took to decide if the transition was right for her, and then more importantly, what steps that she took to meet the right people and make sure that she was in the right place at the right time. While the transition isn't terribly easy, the steps are pretty simple. Now, just to give you a quick heads up, at the end of this episode, we did talk briefly about a bonus document that summarized her journey, and that document is no longer available. However, the good news is this episode, plus the new Optimize Yourself program, has inspired me to create an ultimate guide that is 10 times better. My brand new ultimate guide to making it in Hollywood as a creative, which is an absolute manifesto on the practical steps that you can start taking right away to either get started with or advance in your filmmaking career. No matter what creative craft you specialize in, the strategies that I provide in this guide will absolutely help you move forwards. I cover such topics as how to figure out which ladder that you should be climbing and how to clarify the niche that's the best fit for your skill set, how to become awesome at your specific craft, as well as how to pitch yourself, and most importantly, I do a super deep dive into the art and science of networking, especially if you are a crazy extreme introvert like me. This is 15 years of everything that I've learned throughout my own professional journey distilled down to one jam-packed guide, and I'm offering it to you 100% free. To download your ultimate guide, just visit optimizeyourself.me/Hollywood Ultimate Guide, and I will send it to you immediately. Lastly, before we jump into our interview, I want to give a brief update about the podcast review giveaways. I have been absolutely overwhelmed by the response and the reviews that I've gotten so far, and frankly, even a few of them have brought a tear to my eye. You guys and gals are an amazingly supportive audience, and I cannot thank you enough. And while I am well on the way to my goal of having 100 reviews by December 1st, we still have a long ways to go. For those that have entered the sweepstakes so far, I am ready to announce September's winners. For the review that's titled, "Great Variety of Ideas for Maximizing Your Potential," Laura Beth Oliver wins a human charger. Congrats, Laura. For the review titled, Now I Get It About Sitting All Day, Noak McNeil is the winner of a Topo Mat or a Topo Mini. And funny enough, given that your review is all about learning about the benefits of standing more, this prize should be a perfect fit. And lastly, for her review titled Changed My Perspective, Moni Salazar wins a 1-hour private coaching and mentorship session with me. Congrats, Moni. I cannot wait to help you solve your number one challenge. I'm going to reach out to all of you privately via email to get your prizes taken care of right away. Now, for everybody listening who hasn't left a review yet, all you have to do is visit optimizeyourself.me/win to learn more. And remember, all I'm looking for is honest reviews, nothing more. I cannot thank you enough for your support. You guys are awesome. And now, without further ado, after a brief break to recognize our sponsors, my interview with Monica Daniel. To access the show notes for this episode, please visit optimizeyourself.me/episode 15. This episode is made possible by ErgoDriven, the makers of the Topo Mat and Topo Mini, my number one recommendations for anybody interested in moving more at their height-adjustable workstation. Listen, standing desks are only great if you're standing well. Otherwise, you're constantly fighting fatigue and chronic pain. Not like any other anti-fatigue mat, the Topo is scientifically proven to help you move more throughout the day, which helps reduce discomfort and also increase your focus and productivity. And they're really fun and a great conversation starter too. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/topo. That's TOPO. This episode is made possible by the Human Charger, a revolutionary new light therapy device made specifically for people who spend long days in the dark and don't get enough sunlight, i.e. you and me. Simply put in the earbuds for 12 minutes a day to receive your daily recommended dosage of UV-free white light. Doing so can drastically increase your energy, improve your mood, and increase mental alertness and focus. This device has literally changed my life, and I use it every morning without fail. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/humancharger, and you can use the code OPTIMIZE to get 20% off your order. I'm here today with Monica Daniel, who, as I mentioned before, you may know as somebody that shits sparkles on a regular basis. And I didn't want to bleep that, even though I try to keep this clean, but it's pretty essential to just the podcast in general, because that's how people know you. So also, for those of you that have been loyal listeners of this show since the very beginning, you know that Monica is a member of my very first beta group before Fitness and Post even existed. So Monica, it is a pleasure to have you back on the show with me today.
Hello. I think this is like my third or fourth one I've been on since the beginning.
Yeah, you've been around quite a bit. It's been a while since I've had you on the show, but I'm really excited today about this show because I feel like we're gonna. There's no way to answer this question definitively because there isn't one answer and one path. But the most common question that I'm asked as somebody that works as an editor in scripted television at a fairly high level is people coming up to me saying, "How do I get out of reality and get into scripted?" And there's no right answer to that. And a lot of people will say, well, you just can't do it. It's not going to happen. You have to start from square one, and there's no way to make it work. And I feel like you are the perfect person to talk to about that because you have defied the odds, defied the expectations, and you have crossed over. So what I want to talk about is kind of what your journey has looked like over the last few years, because it's not like one day you woke up and said, I want to work in scripted, and you made a phone call and you got there. You have a very clear journey that I think is very inspiring from the point that you made this decision to all of the things that you did afterwards. And part of the reason we're doing it on a podcast called Fitness and Post is because this program had a lot to do with it, but I also believe that wellness, it needs to be a big part of our lives, and you can't be well if you're working a job that you're not passionate about, that you don't love, and you decided, I'm going to pursue my passion, and you've done that and you've succeeded. So that's kind of the focus of the show today. So before we jump into the whole journey, for anybody that's left in the Twitter sphere that doesn't know who Monica Daniel is, and I know there are very, very few of you left, but for the ones that are left, just kind of give a brief overview of who you are, what you have been doing, because as at the time that we're recording this show, you have not jumped into your first scripted show yet, but by the time the show airs, you will already be on it. So just talk about a little bit about your background, what you've done for your career thus far, and then we'll kind of jump into the journey and the transition from the reality side to the scripted side.
Okay, well, I've actually been, God, I haven't been an assistant for probably about 9.5 years. I was kind of fast tracked as an assistant at the beginning of my career almost a decade ago. And I have been editing all sorts of television for various networks that include like game shows, interview studio shows, lots of documentary clip shows, short packages for stuff like Comic-Con or the red carpet shows. And that's where the Shitting Sparkles comes from, is a lot of those red carpet shows because they're so glamorous. Lately, I've done a couple reality shows as well, and I've also cut a concert show recently. That was my last big job before the transition happened. So I've worked in various different types of editing genres over the several years, and of course, when I started, I wanted to go into scripted like everyone else, but it took me probably about 6 years to start figuring out how to do it. Was a little slow on the uptake just because I don't think I was talking to the right people. And so I wasn't getting the answers that would lead me in that direction. And so it's about 4 years ago, I think I really started actively coming out of my shell. In addition to all, because I've been working steady for the last 10 years, I've never really had to look for work very hard at all. About 4 years ago, I really started working on networking, improving that skill set, because I was a horrendous networker before. I was very awkward. And I just started meeting people. And even though I didn't know how to get into scripted, it was always in the back of my mind. I still want to do it. I still want to get into scripted. I have no idea how to get there. I just started going to mixers and meeting people who worked in scripted. And, I didn't try to ask them a job. I didn't try to ask them to shadow them right away. I was just hanging out. I would just hang out, meet more people. And, over these mixers only happen once a month, and I didn't get to go every month. But what ended up happening is through my tweets, all my tweets I've been doing for the last 4 years, and just going to these mixers and meeting people and just kind of hanging out, just one day I realized I knew a lot of people in scripted, and it kind of that's sort of what roughly led me to get the final opportunity to break into scripted. Is just one day I realized I know several people in scripted, just the same way I met you, Zach. I can't even remember exactly how I met you, to be honest.
Oh, I remember exactly how I met you. I remember the exact spot. So yeah, this is a really good example of why networking is so important. I don't remember the exact time. It was probably in that neighborhood.
I think it was Lossy Pug.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely was. It was 3 to 4 years ago. We were outside the Barnsdale Theater. It was before the event started. It was, I think, one where I spoke, and you came up to me, just this, little person, all like squirrely the way that you are. And you're like, hey, my name is Monica, and I do like this reality stuff, and I've listened to you on the That Post Show podcast, and I feel like I know your whole story, and just admire your work, and that was it. And you were just super nice, and then you kind of hung out afterwards and talked to me a little bit more, and then you just decided that you were going to reach out, and maybe we were going to chat over Twitter or over email. You networked exactly the way that I recommend that people do it, which is you just strike up a very casual, no pressure friendship. Because like you said, if somebody approaches me and they're like, hey, I'm a big fan of yours, I have my demo reel, I really want to get into scripted, I hate reality, can you show this to somebody, or can you look at it, can you give me advice, and hey, if you ever know of anything that opens up, can you please keep me in mind? And the resounding answer is no. I don't know you. I don't have experience working with you. I don't have the time to look at your reel. Maybe that makes me a bad person, but I know that I talk to anybody else and they feel the same way. Like, if I don't know you, I'm not going to look at your reel. I'm not going to recommend you for work. We need to build a relationship first. And that's exactly the way that you did it. And you and I ended up becoming good friends because of that, just because you decided that you were going to approach me that one time. So that's exactly the way to get it started.
And, it reminds me of another time before we were really friends. We were still just like, oh, we knew who each other were. I think through another one of my contacts, because I planted it's not like one path led me to where I am. I planted a lot of seeds and let a lot of like tendrils out, and they all kind of, the right ones intersected. Like enough of them intersected that someone was willing to give me a chance and give me a break and hire me as their assistant. And I remember, so at the same time I just introduced myself, I also have made contact with a lot of editors at EditFest and assistants at EditFest. And I also applied for the Ace Intern series, even though I had already been editing for like 6 or 7 years at that time. And, of course I got rejected because it's meant for people right out of school. But that put me on the mailing list to do the Ace lecture series, where the whole point of the lecture series was everyone who didn't get accepted as an Ace intern to be in people's cutting rooms, they got to go through these panels where it had several editors, several assistants, and everyone, like they had a worksheet where everyone's contact information was, because the whole point was to start building those connections. And so through all that whole process, I actually, a lovely woman I love, Lori Jane Coleman, she used to head the ACE intern program. She invited me to her cutting room. I just shadowed her assistant. And I believe I asked you advice on, because I didn't want to, I'd been editing for so long and I know the dynamics are different in a scripted cutting room. I think I asked you advice on how I should act properly in that type of environment. I remember that conversation with you. You probably don't remember it, but I did have that conversation with you.
I kind of remember it maybe, but yeah, walk me through it, because I don't know if I remember that one specifically.
I think I was asking, should I stand, like things like, oh, should I just stand behind her? Like, I didn't want to like upset her because I just didn't know the etiquette. The etiquette's a little different.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. Now I remember the conversation, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm assuming it was something like you don't want to overwhelm them, but at the same time, if you just sit back and you're a mouse in the corner, you're not going to get as much out of it. So it's really about trying to be interactive while at the same time not getting in their face and just gently asking questions and showing interest, but doing it, and it's still allowing them to kind of have their creative flow and not kind of get in the way of things. At least that's the way that I like to run a room when I have somebody else in it.
And I think that's pretty much what you told me. I mean, kind of what I've been doing over the last 4 years specifically is, I'll ask different people the same question to see what their opinions are. And just to it's basically my form of doing research. I feel like I've done a lot of research. So now when things happen, I know who I can call, or I have the right type of, I know the right type of questions I need to ask to get the answer that I'm not sure of. But it's interesting. So, I mean, how this all kind of relates to Fitness's post as well is, I was kind of tired of working where I was working because I worked on very similar shows. And the thing is, a lot of the shows I worked on, not all of them, but a lot of them, they don't really get you respect as an editor from certain people. And so a lot of times I wouldn't admit to the shows I work on, which is not good for your self-esteem. It's not good for your headspace, especially, if you're getting treated like that from people you respect and you want to learn from. And, I've had people kind of blow me off once they found out some of the stuff I've edited. And, it's fully paid work on big networks that aired worldwide, but it's just, people didn't consider it, they considered it a lower level type of editing, because it wasn't scripted, which was unfortunate and kind of messed with my head a little bit. I think, so I wasn't in the best headspace. And there's also like a lot of really jaded people in the industry. If you look on Twitter, you always see editors who aren't working in scripted kind of lamenting that, they want to work in scripted, but they don't want to have to go back to assisting, which, I did that as well. Cause I'm like, oh man, I don't know what to do. And it took me a while to really understand what I needed to do and accept that and be okay with it. So, I mean, my whole process is I was kind of in a bad place. And if you're in a bad place, it's really hard to, pursue something that's going to challenge you in completely different ways, like me going into scripted, because it's a whole nother world. And even though I was in this bad headspace for a while before I started Fitness and Post, actually, I was in the bad headspace for a little bit. For some reason, there was something that kept me going, pursuing scripted. networked. I still, when the opportunities came along, I would shadow people. And I mean, I want to make the point is I wasn't going to like everyone I knew in script and be like, can I shadow you? Can I shadow you? Can I shadow you? So I had my ups and downs as far as how my morale when I was in a good headspace or bad headspace. And through all of that, I still never stopped trying to learn about what it takes to get into scripted. And I mean, I'm not talking about just independent films. Like I really wanted to work on like major studio television shows. I actually really like the idea because if you have a bad episode, that's okay. You're working on the next one. And I like the fact that you're not working on the same material for like a year. It's like you work on it for like 6 weeks and then you just move on to the next one. So it's going to air. It's not reliant on like a single box office moment. It's going to air on television and you'll just keep going and keep moving on. And I feel like there's a lot more work as far as television goes, just because the amount of television shows and amount of people required on the post teams. So that was really appealing to me. And so despite all my ups and downs, I never really stopped trying to learn about how to get into scripted. I still went to mixers. I still, just tried to make friends with people. And I still tried to just learn about editing as much as possible. And I mean, the really interesting thing to me, and my friend pointed this out to me, is there are actually a couple people who I highly respect. And, they work in scripted and they don't work on the easiest jobs. And they actually discouraged me from pursuing it because they were brutally honest about the amount of work they had to do, what they had to deal with. And they're like, why would you give up what you have? Which is I was working a really nice job for the last decade, practically, pretty much exclusively 8-hour days. I was being benefited for a long time. I was able to work on all types of shows. It allowed me to come home and see my kids. And that was another hurdle is, I have little kids. And for a long time when I had my children, I did not want to give up the time and kind of miss seeing them because they were so little. There were so many things that, I had what they called the golden handcuffs. And there were so many things that was just, there were reasons to not pursue it. And so for a long time, I was like, you know what? I had to pretty much convince myself that I was happy editing what I was editing. And I had to look at the positives of what I was working on and try to find the fun in what I was doing, even though it wasn't what I really wanted to be doing. I convinced myself, I was pretty persuasive to myself for a long time, but I never stopped researching about what it would take to get into scripted. I actually have only told one other person this. I knew I still wanted to get into it because I've had several dreams over the last 4 years about actually getting a job in scripted. And I was so happy about it. It was the weirdest thing. So I would dream about it.
Between the one person that you told, now 4 other people know because you've now told all my listeners. So that's exciting.
4 people?
Yes, all 4 of us plus me. So 6 people now know all about your dreams.
So I mean that just told me that I needed to that's what I really wanted. And for a long time, I still didn't act on it. I was just kept meeting people, and it's funny. I was actually in a bad. It's hard to, pursue something when, you're just not feeling good about yourself. And so when you first approached me about fitness and post, I was in my bad headspace. And then, we did the first challenge group and I was so happy that I was getting off my butt. It was something to help guide me. And that first challenge group, I really focused on like the competition side of it and just like getting my health, improving my health. And it was actually detrimental to my wellness. I realized in retrospect, because I was so focused on the competition part of it. I was just like so upset when I wasn't able to be at the top. There was, I could not beat Dan because I had to go to work and I did not have a mountain next to my house to do hikes all the time. It actually was really demoralizing to me, which was not good. But at least physically speaking, I was doing a lot better. And so after that, and especially with the second alumni challenge group, my focus was probably 85% on my wellness. I needed to make sure that I was mentally healthy, in a good place. Because if I'm, physically healthy, it's not going to do me much good if I'm like mentally not in a good place. So I really focused on my wellness. And I think that helps me kind of have a more positive attitude and outlook on things. I was able to understand myself better and what I really wanted, and just have those moments where I could really kind of reflect on what I really want out of my career, what I want out of my life. So in that challenge group, it's that focus on the wellness really helped make things clear for me about what I wanted to do. And the only thing was trying to find an opportunity for that to happen. So that's kind of what led me to kind of have kind of different outlook on what I was doing. And I discovered that my career has had phases. So my first phase is just when I was a green editor, working on like mostly clip shows at the time when I was a green editor, and just trying to mimic other editors and just kind of learn how to edit. And then my second phase is when I was actually getting pretty jaded and feel like it was hitting a ceiling in my career. And that was about 4 years ago. And that's when I went to my first editor's retreat, which really opened my eyes to like the vastness of the world of post-production that is not just LA, because there's a whole world out there. And that's where I met a lot of my friends to this day I keep in contact with from the retreat all around the world. And that's where I first got on Twitter, which now I'm told I'm internet famous, which I think they're making fun of me. But apparently people know me on Twitter.
No, you're internet famous. You're going to have to get over it.
People still recognize me from Twitter. And I'm like, huh? Oh, hi. It's quite odd, which I'm sure you have way more followers than I do.
Yeah, followers doesn't mean too much. Trust me, you're much more popular than I am. At least more likable.
Oh, so the second phase was really about expanding beyond my little bubble of where I was working, because I worked with a lot of the same people for a long time. And so that was where I started networking, going to Lossy Pug, and really just starting to meet more people outside of my genre of editing. And the third phase started a couple months ago. The place where I've been getting most of my work for the last several years, they're basically shutting down production in that division. And it had nothing to do with me, but there's just less shows. They want to go out to third party, or they want their shows produced by third party production companies instead of in-house. So there was less work to go around. So I just decided to take that time to really just kind of enjoy some time off for the first time in 10 years. I have not enjoyed time off. I was always freaking about the next job I needed to get. If I had like a week off, I would freak out. So I was just deciding, I'm just going to take time off. And of course, I started getting calls for more work, and I was like, oh, great, cool. I like I said, I don't really have to look hard for work, which I feel very fortunate about. Just for the summer alone, I turned down like 4 or 5 jobs because of the scripted show that was coming up. I got offered the scripted show, and I was like, nah, I can't. I'm sorry, guys. So it's like I would have been okay if I didn't go into scripted. I'm doing fine in reality and documentary. But, I decided to enjoy time with my kids. And then one day, this is how I got into scripted. And, my outlook, since I was focusing on wellness, I was in a better headspace. I was just taking time for myself and to think about what I really wanted, and just enjoying time with my kids. I get a Facebook message. Which is funny because you use Facebook to like get your jump in network television scripted. So mine started with Facebook as well. I got a Facebook message from a friend of mine who I had met 2 years ago at Edit Fest. I just had lunch with him. I had no idea who he was. We were talking about a show that I had watched. And I didn't hear the beginning of the conversation. So I just started talking about the show and the next episode they were doing. And then someone pointed out to me, they're like, he edits that show, right? I was like, oh, you do? Oh, cool. And then I just immediately started going into like story and about the characters of the show. And that is how I met this editor who, and I've known him for 2 years, who decided to hire me on this next show. So we kept in touch. He follows me on Twitter. I follow him. We're Facebook friends. So he knows I know a lot of scripted assistants. So he Facebook messaged me, hey, I'm starting this new job. It's going to be big. Do you know any assistants that you could recommend? Because I need to look for a new assistant because mine's moving up. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll see who I can find. I'm like, all the ones I'd recommend are probably working, but I'll see if I could find anyone who's not working that I could recommend. It's like, okay, great. So then I kind of thought about it for an hour and I was like, should I just ask him to consider me? Should I do it? I literally questioned myself for an hour. I texted my husband because to make this kind of step, like I wanted my husband to be 100% okay with it as 100% support, because I could not be happy if my family is happy and not supporting me as well. Because it's not the job requires a lot of hours, and even though the work is not like manual labor, it's still hard work. It's very mentally challenging. And so I needed his support, and his immediate response was like, "Go for it, do it." And I was like, okay, what's the worst he could do? Say no? Psh, and I'd just be back in the same spot I was. So it doesn't matter. So I just went for it. And this was my exact message to him. Hey, so what do I have to do to convince you to consider me for an interview? Not the job, just the interview. And I spit out all of the skills I've acquired that would be relevant to assisting. But because I've done a lot of research, I have a very strong idea of the skills assistants need in scripted. So I was like, in my online editing work, I know how to do exports, imports. I constantly help my friends all the time with, Avid tech support. You're one of the people I help.
Oh, yes. You are my Avid tech support. You and Mariana, you guys are Avid tech support. And you know me, anytime I can't figure something out, I'm on Facebook or I'm messaging you saying, why can't I make this work? Monica, fix it. And then 5 minutes later, you fix it.
So, and it's always over the phone. I'm never there. I'm just like, so what's the issue? Okay, try this. But, I was like, I can do this. I'm like, because I've been editing for a long time, I'll be able to deliver sound design if you would like that, that will be relevant to the scene, and you do a good job that if you want to pick up from there or however you like to work it. I have lots of, I can do various types of effects directly in Avid. Stuff that people don't realize you can do. These are all the skills I could bring to you. What do I have to do to have you convince me? And this is still all in Facebook messages. He just responded. He's like, hey, I'm actually really open to this idea, but what brought the change of heart? Because, he's known me for a long time. There was no trying to fluff up my skill set. He knows me. We had a conversation a long time ago about how I wasn't ready to give up my time or take time away from my children to work longer hours in scripted because, I was working 8-hour jobs. And so he knew all this about me. And I responded to him. I'm like, you know what? You're right. When we had that conversation 2 years ago, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for that. It wasn't the right time for me. And with this type of work, I know that you need someone who's going to be committed because the deadlines are insane. There's so much going on. You need someone who you are sure of will do their best to get the job done as best they can. You can't have someone who's wishy-washy. And I was like, so you're right. 2 years ago, I wasn't ready, but I am now. What do I need to do to convince you? And I think that pretty much convinced him for the interview. So the next day we had a lunch interview. We luckily we get along really well too, since we already knew each other. And even though he had known me for a couple years, and we the lunch interview was great, he did tell me, he's like, I will be interviewing several other assistants who have experience. And I was like, oh no, I totally understand. Honestly, and I even told him, honestly, I'm surprised. I expected you to say no. Because, people don't like taking chances on someone who's new. It's a risk. But I just want you to know, I will bust my ass. And I really want to do this. I'm just trying to figure out, I just need the opportunity. In addition to that, I was actually telling him stories about that happened literally weeks before. So I was telling stories about, I actually told them a story about how I helped you and Natalie not too long before with a problem that you guys couldn't solve. And I got Natalie like going in like less than 5 minutes. I talked her through the problem and she was able to, leave work and go home. Unless you made her stay. I don't know.
Oh, I chained her to the desk. She's not allowed to leave until dawn.
But she was able to get that one task done at least fairly quickly after I talked to her. I told him that story. I told him, stuff that he wouldn't hear on my resume. There was a story where I was actually, the month before, I was passed over for a reality show to work on because I only had like a couple reality shows on my resume and they wanted someone with years of experience. So they're like, no, we're going to bring in our guys. So cut to a couple weeks later, they're like super behind. I was like the 4th or 5th editor they were adding on because they were so crazy. Like it was so bad. One of the EPs was in the bays with us every day, just overseeing everything is how behind they were. And so I came in for Saturday just to help out. Halfway through that day, they're like, can you work next week? I'm like, sure. Come Monday, literally my second day, the EP's working with me in the room. And she's like, can you just like cut everything for us? And I just started laughing because I was like, this is literally my second day on this show. She's like, I know. Where have you been?
And by the way, you didn't want to hire me.
I didn't point that out, but I was definitely thinking it. And I was
I'm happy to point it out.
And the funny thing was, and the whole point was, I didn't have a lot of experience in reality, but as soon as I jumped in and I just kind of figured out what the show was about, like they didn't want to let me go. Like over their lead editor, I discovered because of the way the pay worked out, because I came in later and I had a very set rate. They had negotiated everyone else's pay based on how much they wanted to pay them total, because it was that company had hourly rates. My rate was already set. They couldn't make me go lower. So I was actually the most expensive editor they had. And they were making me stay the longest every day because they wanted me to finish out the work for the shift. And they would send other people home. So I feel like it was a good reflection, I think, on me. And so I was telling the editor these stories. And also there was like one time where their lead editor, the guy they brought in, he was offering to stay to finish out the show, to lock the show and send to mix and all that. And both the supervising producer and executive producer were like, oh, well, no, we're going to have Monica actually stay. And he was looking at me like, hey, I could stay for you if you want to go home. And I was just looking between them. I'm like, you know what? It's their call, because I didn't want to burn that bridge with them. And so I stayed, and that shift was a 15-hour shift on the 6th day. So it was a really long shift. So I told him that story just to demonstrate something that my resume couldn't demonstrate for me. And he even told me, he's like, your resume says you're not ready. Talking to you, I know you're ready. And, he said my resume said I wasn't ready because I didn't have any studio scripted experience on my resume, even though I had all the skills required in the various jobs I've done, because I've done a lot of online editing. And so that's where a lot of the deliverables comes in, and exports and turnovers. And so telling him those stories about everything I've done, it really helped sell me. And luckily you acted as a reference for me, Zach, which I'm highly appreciative of.
Yeah, he didn't seem to be worried about the syphilis or the leprosy at all. I warned him. I told him, but he's like, that's cool, whatever, I can handle it.
And I also had another person who, I won't say his name, but it's someone we both know. He was a great reference for me. And I just want to say, if people tell you never work for free, I call bull. Because I did a side freebie gig on an independent film where I was literally just assembling scenes. I did probably about 20, 25 minutes of the film with, hero takes, implementing any director notes or ideas, just so the supervising editor had a place to start. But I really wanted to practice assembling scripted scenes and see what it was like working with someone who, he works on a lot of network television. So I really wanted to see what it was like working with him, because I heard great things about him. And I actually had met this editor several years before at another Edit Fest, which is kind of funny. It just happened to work out that way, that we connected randomly through different means, but I had already known him. But through that freebie gig, I got a fantastic recommendation from him. So, like I said, if anyone ever says don't work for free ever, I call bullshit, because you just have to be selective about it and smart about it. To me, it was a calculated risk. It was worth the time I took to work for free to work with this editor.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I want to let you continue until the end of the story before I jump in. But as a sidebar, the only reason that I got where I am in my entire trajectory, if you trace back the very specific steps that got me to working on Empire, it's because of free work that I did. So do I think that you should pimp yourself out and you should always be doing free work everywhere? Absolutely not. But to just make it a hard and fast rule that I don't work for free, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice, because the contacts that you can build on the right kind of free work are worth way more than your full day rate. So, but that's a tangent. I want you to finish your story. Then I'm going to jump in and I want to dissect all of this.
Oh, it's kind of convoluted and complicated. So all this happened on literally the second day. The first day he messaged me. The second day we had lunch, and he told me he was going to, meet with other people, but he was really happy he met with me. The third day I got offered the job. I lost my mind. I really lost my mind. I freaked out. And because I had wanted it so badly. And it literally happened over a period of 3 days of, me just one day trying to figure out, what kind of reality job am I going to take next? To all of a sudden, 3 days later, holy crap, I'm going to be working on one of the most anticipated shows for the fall season.
Executive produced by Steven Spielberg, no less.
We haven't even said what the show was. I did publicly announce it. So I'm going to be working on Minority Report for Fox, executive produced by Steven Spielberg. And I will be working down the hall from you.
Which is the coolest part of my estimation. And by the time this airs, you have already been working on this show for, God knows how long. But at the time of recording, you haven't quite started yet. But yeah, by the time this airs, you'll already be on Minority Report. But yeah, the weirdest part is that we're going to be on the same floor down the hall from each other. So that's really bizarre.
Yeah. So, and the thing with this story, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, I got the job. I can't wait to the start date. It's like, no, I immediately, I had Lori Jane Coleman's book about assistant editing. That's kind of like the Bible for people working in scripted television as assistants, and especially if you're breaking in. So I had an idea. I immediately texted some of my friends who are scripted assistants on some huge TV shows and films that I just happen to be friends with. And I was like, hey, you guys, I need a really big favor. I'll buy you a beer. Can you help train me? Can I shadow you? Can you just give me your tips, please? And they both were just like, dude, whatever you need, I'm so happy for you. And they've been great, and they help. It's like people really want to help me and do well, which is so humbling and nice, because sometimes you get crapped on in this business. I've been crapped on recently by people. It's like for no reason other than I don't even know. But it helps to know that I actually do have people who support me and they want me to do well, and they're so excited for me. And so I immediately contacted them, and I shadowed them and was asking questions to see what I need, just whatever questions I had, and their advice on the proper way to act. Cause I've been editing, I've been in the editor position with a really good reputation. I've been the top editor where I worked in the division of NBC Universal where I worked for the last several years. So, I needed to take my behavior down a notch to, what's proper for a green rookie assistant editor in scripted. And so, I was asking them questions about that, just kind of changing my perspective and my mindset of where I'm at, which is, I think, an important thing. And I think because I was taking time for myself. I was in a much more positive headspace for a long time. And you'll see people on Twitter. It's like they whine about having to, essentially, eat crap as an assistant. Not that they will, but it's like they like being in that editor position. And it's like I'm okay going down to assistant. And people who don't understand the business, they're like, why would you go down to assistant? I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is actually, I think this is better for me because this is a whole new world. It's a little safer for me to figure out how this world works as an assistant. There's so many different things that it's like I don't know that I don't know. And where I'm at, it's like I could recognize that and be okay with taking that step back without having my like ego get all upset. And I think that's a hurdle a lot of editors who want to transition have to overcome is their ego. They've been the big fancy pants editor for so long. Why would they need to go back to assisting? It's like, well, sometimes it's good to take a step back so you kind of reapproach things with like a beginner's mind, because you're not going to cut it the same way you would cut a reality show, or the dynamics are different working with directors and then working with writers and producers. It's not the same as working with people in reality or documentaries sometimes. And things are way more organized, oh my God, in scripted than all of the reality shows I worked on. Sometimes I just feel like people just like dump a bunch of footage on me. They're like, there you go. I'm like, so what is this? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, all the names are just like random numbers. Can someone label it? They're too busy right now. It's like, great, thanks, guys. It's like that's the kind of stuff you have to deal with in reality. In scripted, things are much more organized. I feel like there's much more discipline that's expected, and I actually like that. I want to be held to a higher standard. For the longest time, I was the only one holding myself to a high standard, not other people. And it's like, how am I going to get better if no one's holding me to a higher standard and challenging me? I need that. And so I was the only one holding myself to that higher standard and challenging myself to get better. So it's going to be a nice change of environment. And I'm okay with going back to assisting because I feel like it'll kind of remold me, and I'll be even a stronger editor, because the nice thing about having all my contacts in documentary and reality is, during those hiatuses or maybe after this first job, if I can't find another one right away because, I'm competing with people who've been assisting for years with lots more contacts, I'll be able to go back to editing non-union jobs until I could get that next scripted job. So I actually kind of like that I'll be able to go back and forth if I need to and work on a variety of things as well. So, it's like I've constantly been training. And actually after my editor told me he was going to hire me, almost immediately after, the Editors Guild was having an assistant editing seminar where they were going to have a seminar and a workshop. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. And I didn't get it in my email, but he got it and he forwarded it to me. He's like, hey, if you have a chance, you should, see if you could sign up for this. And I immediately signed up, and I was like, yep, just signed up. I got the workshop on this day and this on this day. He was like, okay, great. Because he's taking a chance on me, and I want to make sure that I want to inspire confidence in him that he made the right choice. So, I'm letting him know everything I'm doing to prepare for this job, which, being trained by my friends, reading the book and doing these training by the Editors Guild. And, part of that, all my friends supporting me, like 3 more people forwarded me that email about that assistant editing training seminar. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. There are so much people supporting me and wanting me to succeed. It's such a great feeling.
Well, as you know, I've been one of your biggest cheerleaders, and that's because I've kind of watched this trajectory happen over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. And I don't remember exactly when it was that we met, but it was around that one of your first mixers, I think, where you were approaching people. And what I want to do is kind of, now that we've heard this whole story, I want to dissect what is the core of the decisions that you made and how you took actionable steps to make this happen? Because I'm a really big fan of what are the practical things I can pull from this to learn from your story and be able to apply it to my own. Because I think at the surface, somebody's going to listen to this and say, oh, well, some guy sent you a Facebook message and 3 days later you have a job. Well, that's never going to happen to me. And that's just people making excuses. And what I've done over the last 15 years is I've tried to figure out what is the core component of being able to become successful in this field, but really in any field, because that's really the question that people ask more than anything else. If you speak on a panel or you're on Twitter doing post chat or whatever it is, or they approach you at some event like EditFest, and there's always at least one person that says, I'm just starting out. What is the number one tip that you can give me if I just want to make it? I want to make it and I want to do it and I'm passionate. How do I do it? And it's a really hard question to answer. But what I've done is I've distilled it into two very distinct things. And you've done both of those, which is why I wanted to talk about this specific story. I always tell people that there are two very key components if you want to make it in this business or frankly any industry. The first of which is that you have to be really, really good at what you do for a living. And the second is that people have to know that you exist. And if you have one or the other, you're not going to make it. Because there are a lot of people, especially in our industry, which is full of so many introverted people, that chose this industry because you get to sit in a dark room by yourself and create without people bothering you, that they may be amazing at what they do, but if they don't get out and network and they don't have the social skills to build networks of people around them, they're going to go nowhere. And I know people like that just sit there and complain about, oh, well, I'm so good at what I do and blah, 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 but I'm not getting anywhere. Well, it's because they're not networking. And then you see the other side, which are the social butterflies that are going to all the mixers and they're going to all the events and they're meeting people and they're handing out their business card and they're really slick and they're really conversational. And then they give you something like a reel or a card or a link, and you do happen to go look at their work, and you're like, you kind of suck, right? Like, I'm not going to hire that person either. So the two key components, no matter what you're trying to get into, it doesn't matter if it's scripted, reality, music videos, basket weaving, business, like you have to be really good and focused on being a good craftsman at your chosen field, and people have to know that you exist so they know that you're good at what you do. And you've done both of those, and I want to go way back to something you said in the beginning that stuck out to me, which is that you planted a seed. And that's one of the big mistakes that I think a lot of people make is they say, well, I planted the seed and it didn't grow, so it's not my fault. I did what I was supposed to. You don't plant a seed. You're a farmer and you plant an entire field of seeds. You plant them everywhere, and the odds are pretty good that most of them are going to die, right? They're not going to sprout, they're not going to come out of the ground, and they're not going to grow into something larger.
And I've had several things drop.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my God, I've sown entire fields of seeds on several continents, and most of them have not turned into anything, but I just keep throwing the seeds in the ground, waiting for something to pop. I mean, that's the story of my life with my documentary film right now. Like, when you look at where I am in my career as an editor, I've made it pretty far, and I'm on a pretty good TV show that's pretty high level. When it comes to being an independent documentary filmmaker, I am at the bottom rung of the ladder, and I am planting 10 seeds a day, most of which are dying on the vine, but I just keep planting them, waiting for that one that's going to grow. And that's the approach that you took. And part of the reason that you got where you are is you just kept planting the seeds and you nurtured them, and some of them grew and some of them sprouted and became really strong plants, and other ones just died. And they just sat there and they died. And that's the game. That's the way that it works. But again, the other component of it is not just the seeds that you planted. It's the fact that everybody that met you and talked to you knew that you were really good at what you did. And there are some people that are going to be snobs, and they're going to say, well, I don't care how good your packages are for red carpet specials, like whatever, like that's not what I do for a living. But then there are the other people that recognize, well, that's not what I do, but I see that you have taken the best out of what it is that you're working on, and that's the more important component. Like, for example, if I look at a young person's work or I look at their student work, I don't say, well, this is really low budget. I say, given what you have in front of you, what somebody gave you, whether it was footage or whatever it is, what did you do with it? Are you capable of taking something and making it better? So I don't care what you started with, I care what you ended with. And that's another reason that I think you got where you are, is because you're really good at what you do, and that those skills translate into whatever field you're going to go into. So I think those are really the two key components that people need to look at, not the idea that, oh, well, some editor that she met had a job opening and Facebooked her and she's got a job. Like, the people that are going to be the naysayers and say, oh, you got lucky, that's what they're going to focus on. But what you really need to focus on is the journey of years and years that you went through doing all of these things to finally land the job that you have. And I guarantee you, I'll put it out there right now, that when you get bumped up to editor, I'll let you have another show and we'll talk all about that too, because that's inevitable and that's going to happen. So your journey isn't over. You're just now on the path that you want to be on and climbing the right ladder.
Yeah, and it's funny because I kind of, without realizing what it would lead into, for a lot of editors' goals, they want to join American Cinema Editors. They want to join ACE. They want to have that acronym at the end of their name. And I want that too. But I knew that my credits were not appropriate for what they were looking for. So I was trying to figure out, how could I get more involved with ACE, just surround myself by all these fantastic storytellers, just so I could learn with them, from them, just meet them, just hang out. And I discovered the affiliate membership. And so I applied for the affiliate membership, which basically I don't get to use the acronym yet. Only full active members get to use that. But I get all other privileges. I'll be able to vote in the eddies. I'll, go to the mixers and special events for ACE members. I am technically an ACE member. And I just did that because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to play the long game. When I have, this credits that I think will be deemed acceptable to apply for full active ACE membership, I don't want to be like just a nameless stranger to them on the other end of a resume. I want them to know me. I want them to know who I am, because it's hard going through the process. It's a very lengthy process to be a full active member. And so I decided to just join ACE. And then one day when I think I might have a chance of being accepted as a full active member, it'll be probably less stressful for me, that's for sure, because they won't just see me as like another stranger applicant. They'll actually know me. And, that's kind of what I've been doing with my careers. I'm going to play the long game now and see what happens. And that's kind of how I ended up getting this scripted job. And also, being an ACE member, people look at me now as, wow, you're really serious about this career. And I'm like, oh yes, I'm serious. I was always serious about this career, but that just kind of cements it for some people. And they realized how serious I am about my career. I'm not just collecting a paycheck. This is what I love to do. There are a lot of editors out there.
It's the sparkles that throw people off. I think that's what it is. The sparkles are throwing everybody off.
That's the other problem. A lot of people thought that's all I did, even though I did that 2 months out of the 12 months of the year. The rest of the year, I was actually cutting documentaries. And, I've had comments even recently of people like, yeah, well, that's cool. You could do all those effects. I can't do them, but I tell story. I'm like, that's great. So do I.
The other piece that I want to pull out of this, other than just the general advice on quote unquote, how do you make it? I think the really key component to this, and this may sound like a shameless self-promotion for the podcast and the program, but I really firmly believe that you would not have made this transition if you were not in the right place with your health. And I think that's a really big component of this, because you really found your self-confidence and found the energy and the perseverance to really make this transition because you felt better, because you were treating yourself better, because you were eating better, you were being more active, you were focusing on your wellness. And I don't think you would have had the conviction to say to this editor, you know what, 2 years ago I wasn't ready, but now I am. If you felt the same way that you did when I met you a year and a half ago and we had our first meeting, I don't think you would have been able to do that. So that's really why I wanted to bring you on the show more than anything, is I really feel that once you decided to treat yourself like you deserve to be treated and focus on your health, that's when everything changed. And that's really what I'm trying to emphasize with this program, is that if you become more empowered as an editor or an assistant or whatever you do, or even more importantly, when you're more empowered as a human being, because you have more energy and more focus and more drive, because you have the physical stamina and you have the mental clarity because of what you're eating and the activity that you're doing and the way you're managing stress, your entire life starts to change. So that's really what I'm trying to emphasize, is making these lifestyle changes can have a huge impact on the amount you get in your paycheck and the job you're doing every day. So it's not just, well, I want to lose a few pounds around the waist and want to be able to run a 5K. It's like, those are just the small pieces that can get you to the point where your entire life can change as it has for you because you focused on your health.
Yeah, and I mean, focusing on the wellness, especially because even my husband tells me all the time, he's like, dude, you are way too hard on yourself. And I think it's just I push myself so hard. I had great examples in parents. They worked really hard. They're very successful at what they do, and they started from pretty much nothing, and they've accomplished so much. And so I just feel like, man, how could I live up to them? Like, because they gave me a pretty comfortable childhood. How could I possibly pull off what they were able to pull off and like go through? And so I push myself really hard, and I expect a lot more of myself than no one expects more of me than me. Like people are kind of tell me, it's like, dude, you don't need to do all that extra stuff. I'm like, yeah, but it's better like this. And the producers appreciate it at the end, but sometimes the other editors are like, damn it, you're making me look bad. I'm like, I'm not doing anything to make you look bad. I am just doing my job.
Well, and that's one of my biggest pet peeves. I just have to interrupt because that's something that I get a lot too, where I've pretty much gotten that my whole life, and I'm not tooting my own horn. It's just that's the way that I am, is I'm a perfectionist, and I go as far as I can. And if somebody says, well, you're making me look bad, no, you are making you look bad. Let's just make that very clear. If you're the one that's sitting back doing the bare minimum, somebody else is going above and beyond, you're the one that's making you look bad, not me and not Monica. And if that makes people upset, so be it, but that's just the way that it is.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right, just pointing out that I think when you approached me about fitness and post, I probably wouldn't have had been in the right headspace to, with confidence and unapologetically say that, and admit that, I wasn't ready to make the transition 2 years ago, but now I am. I probably wouldn't have had the courage to do that. And where I am now, I know what I want. And if they can't see that, then, it doesn't work out. I'm not going to hold it against people who don't want to, take a chance on someone who's essentially a rookie in scripted. I know what I'm capable of. And I even said this to the editors, like, I can do this. I know I can do this. And I learn quickly. I pick things up really fast. I'll have to learn some of the paperwork. I know that and I'll do whatever I can. But I told him I need someone to give me the chance. And he's like, yeah, it's a catch-22, isn't it? Like, he recognized it. And he's like, if someone gave me a chance, I want to give you that chance. I was able to inspire enough confidence in him to take a chance on me. And I think that's just a lot of that is reflected. It's how I view myself and how I present myself. I always try to be really positive. If people don't want to hang out with people who are like sulky or whiny, especially if we're going to be spending a lot of hours together working closely. And I'm sure you completely understand that. You wouldn't want to hire someone who's sulky or whiny.
No, I make it very clear to people that if it's a choice between highly experienced and whiny and negative, or completely raw with no experience but positive and passionate, I will take the latter 100 times out of 100, and that's always who I hire. Because if you're going to whine about your position and say, oh, I'm better than this and I don't want to be here and whatever, like, gone. You're not even on my list. But if you're somebody that says, you know what, I don't have a lot of experience, but I'm really passionate and I just want to learn, bam, hired, done.
And yeah, that's pretty much how I approached it. I went in pretty much expecting, oh, he's not going to hire me. Who would want to, hire the rookie? But you know what? I'm going to go for it anyway. And I'll take it as a learning experience. This is what it's like to get interviewed for these jobs. There you go. And so, I just went in kind of with the attitude is, yeah, of course I want the job. And just to see what I could learn from the experience. And he decided to hire me anyway.
Well, and there you go. That's how it works. So you're an overnight success, right?
10
That's
years.
how it works.
10 years.
10-year overnight success. So I'm going to help you practice for this question because I guarantee that you're going to be asked this in the future. And this is kind of a lightning round. You just spoke on a panel. You've got 60 seconds until the next person comes up. Somebody says, I'm so inspired by your story. I work in reality right now. How do I transition to scripted?
Start meeting more people who work in scripted. Don't ask them for jobs. Just hang out with them. Start meeting them and just be who you are. I mean, that's was my philosophy. That's what I did.
And be awesome at what you do. That was the other thing that you did and focused on all the time, because had you not been awesome at what you do, nobody would have cared and you'd still be doing what you're doing all by yourself.
Well, one thing I looked at is I'm like, man, I wasted all this time. I could have been editing and scripted already if I had just got my head out of my ass and figured this out sooner. But then I look back and I'm like, I am so strong in a lot of my skills that will help me as an assistant. I have that advantage over people because when I've met other assistants and I realized that my visual effects skills far surpasses theirs.
Your visual effects skills far surpass most editors, including me. You embarrass me with your skills on the Avid. I'm like, why is it that I'm in my position and you're in the position that you're in? You kick my ass on Avid. It's embarrassing.
And I don't know. It's just the shows I work on. It required me to figure it out. I actually took it beyond what the producers expected, which is why they always hired me. They pretty much, they're like, dude, there's no one like, I've been told, without you, there's no award season, because I don't think they've really found someone that has they've been as happy with as me. And that's not being an egotistical ass or anything. That's literally a quote from what people have told me several times. So they might be a little bummed if I actually, have work for the next award season and they can't hire me. They're going to be like, oh man. Actually, a couple of them already told me. They're like, wait, does that mean you can't work award season? Like that was their first thought.
Yeah. Most likely, if you're unscripted, you're going to be pretty booked.
I'm like, we'll see. We'll see if the show gets picked up for the second half of the season. I don't know.
Exactly.
If it does, then no. If it doesn't, then I might be available. I don't know.
Well, I'm super, super happy that we could share this story and people can really see firsthand that it can absolutely be done. You can transcend that gap, that just black hole that people think cannot be transcended between reality and scripted. It can happen, and there's a very clear way to do it. And I'm really happy that we could share your story today. So thank you so much for being so candid and inspiring other people that I'm sure want to do the same thing.
Well, I always tell people, they're like, oh it's funny. People are like, oh, I'm not surprised at all. I was like, really? I was surprised. I just think of myself, I'm just a working editor, or I guess assistant editor now in scripted, but I just work hard. I have to, earn my pay at every single job with every new producer. I have to earn their respect and my pay.
Thank you for listening to episode 15 of the Optimize Yourself podcast. To access the various links and resources mentioned in this episode, just visit optimizeyourself.me/episode 15. If this episode inspired you to start taking some real action to get where you want in Hollywood and land your dream job, I have great news because you ain't seen nothing yet. I just released my brand new Ultimate Guide to Making It in Hollywood as a Creative. That is an absolute manifesto on the practical steps that you can take to begin forging your own path to success. No matter what creative craft you specialize in, these strategies that I provide in this guide will absolutely help you move forwards. I cover such topics as how to figure out which ladder you should be climbing and how to clarify the niche that's the best fit for your skill set, how to become awesome at your specific craft, as well as how to pitch yourself. And most importantly, I do a deep dive into the art and science of networking, especially if you're an introvert like me. This is 15 years of everything that I've learned throughout my own professional journey distilled down to one jam-packed guide, and I'm giving it to you 100% free. To download your ultimate guide, just visit optimizeyourself.me/Hollywood Ultimate Guide, and I will send it to your inbox immediately. Also, as a final super quick reminder, you can win a Topo Mat, Topo Mini, human charger device, or a 1-hour coaching session via Skype with yours truly. And all it takes to win is 2 minutes to leave an honest review of the show on iTunes to be eligible for prizes throughout the months of October and November. Visit optimizeyourself.me/win for more instructions and to register your review. Thank you for listening. Be well. This episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast was made possible by ErgoDriven, the makers of the Topo Mat and Topo Mini, my #1 recommendations for anyone interested in moving more at their height-adjustable workstation. Listen, standing desks are only great if you're standing well. Otherwise, you're constantly fighting fatigue and chronic pain. Not like any other anti-fatigue mat, the Topo is scientifically proven to help you move more throughout the day, which helps reduce discomfort and also increase your focus and productivity. My friends at ErgoDriven did extensive testing and compared their product to the top-of-the-line floor mats, and they found the Topo drove almost 2.5 more moves per minute with 270% more foot motion. Now, what this simply means is that the Topo users move more. I'm standing on one as I read this, and I don't go to a single job without it. And if you're smaller and you're concerned the Topo mat is too big, or you simply don't have the floor space, there's a Topo Mini for that. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/topo. That's TOPO. This episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast was made possible by the Human Charger, a revolutionary new light therapy device made specifically for people who spend long days in the dark and don't get enough sunlight, i.e. you and me. It's not a light box. It's smaller than an iPod Nano, and it fits right in your pocket. Now, no different than listening to music, all you have to do is simply put in the earbuds for 12 minutes a day to receive your daily recommended dosage of UV-free white light. This light stimulates the photosensitive receptors in your brain, which then affects your neurochemistry via neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. Doing so can drastically increase your energy, improve your mood, and increase mental alertness and focus. This device has literally changed my life, and I use it every morning without fail. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/humancharger and use the code OPTIMIZE to get 20% off your order.